What's up?
What's up, bud? How's it going?
How you doing?
Pretty good. How are you doing, more importantly?
I'm immensely depressed, but who isn't these days?
Oh, well, I don't know.
Okay, your video. Yeah, I want to talk about the one you uploaded to YouTube recently. It was like scripted. It was about like how
Oh, God. It said
you
scripted, but it wasn't actually scripted. The guy just did a script for it, but I wasn't. Okay, don't hold me to that standard. But yeah, sorry, go ahead. What about it?
Oh, okay, so am I not supposed to hold you to what you say in that video
No, no,
then?
no, you can. It's just like, it wasn't the most carefully. It was a very spontaneous thing, I'm just saying, but go ahead.
Gotcha. All right, full disclosure,
Uh-huh.
I agree with everything you say, but I'm just gonna try and like find the boundaries of where where these like principles go. Um, and also, I'm not much of a debater, so if I say something really stupid, like be nice to me.
Okay,
Um,
gotcha.
okay. Basically so your model requires a question for everything, right? The question that must be answered for everything you propose is, does this improve personal happiness?
Mm-hmm.
And your model has an issue because there's another side to this that leftists would argue, that
Mm-hmm.
leftists love this, which is the question of, does this improve a collective happiness? Right. And you're going to have an issue with this model conflicting with a collective happiness, that you can't always just improve personal happiness and not improve collective happiness. Like it's going to be one or the other sometimes. Right. Hello.
Possibly, yeah. Maybe. Wait,
Okay.
hold on. Just give me 1 second real quick, okay? Hold on one
Yeah.
second real quick. My train is misbehaving so much, and I'm just trying to find out why. Okay. Copper mine, you need to wait for full cargo. Okay. What was I thinking? Okay. I'm so sorry. Okay. Um yeah, so balance of personal happiness versus collective happiness. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in general, I think I would say that you shouldn't that like most gains in collective happiness result in gains of personal happiness, but I don't think you can compel an individual to make great personal sacrifices for the collective. But go ahead. Yeah, we can talk around that if you want.
I think you can, but we're gonna explore this.
Let's explore.
The Well, explore is what we're gonna do. We are
Mm-hmm.
also gonna talk about maximize. So this is what you said. I wrote down what you. I actually prepared an outline. If you'd like, I can send it to you, and if you want to like read over it real quick, or
Just
you want to just shoot
fucking
it.
fire away. Go.
All right. Maximize personal happiness. You said that maximizing personal happiness is the basis for all moral principles.
Mm-hmm.
And you argued that all attempt to satisfy this as a moral principle. So what you essentially argued was egoism. You
Mm-hmm.
basically said that everybody is an egoist, even if they deny they're an egoist, they're an egoist.
Yeah.
And you argued that in order for others to be motivated to satisfy your happiness, you must satisfy the happiness of others as well.
Mm-hmm.
And in a roundabout way, this is a social contract. You just reinvented the social contract. I think you even said it that at some point.
Yeah.
But basically, that's what it is. So more under this framework, morality is transactional,
Mm-hmm.
and morality only extends if moral values are reciprocated. So here's where I want to stress test this.
Okay.
Like, if I find a tribe of savages in the jungle, can I genocide them? Like, can this moral system justify genociding them if it maximizes my happiness or my group happiness or my personal happiness?
Yeah,
and
okay.
they don't reciprocate these values.
I need
ever.
to tread lightly around this because I've actually had this exact hypothetical brought up to me before by Vegan Games.
Oh God.
It's a good hypothetical. So I would say the answer is yes, but I would provide the caveat that I don't believe there currently exists any human population that is incapable of reciprocating some level of respected value. So I would say yes to this hypothetical creature, but I wouldn't call that creature human. It's something inhuman. It's something different.
Okay. Well, I'm willing to bet you don't believe that there exists no human population that exists which is incapable of reciprocating this value.
Correct.
I don't think you would say ISIS, right? This collective of humans who belong to this population, these terrorists, are capable of reciprocating any value that's meaningful to you. That under your system, it would be perfectly justifiable to kill everybody in ISIS. They'll never reciprocate your values. They deny your social contract.
Yeah. So these two things are I don't know if I would agree with that, but if I were to grant you that, I would argue that ISIS and random groups of humans are fundamentally different. I'm gonna talk around a little bit because I think I know what you're getting at. the difference between ISIS is the people in ISIS have made a conscious decision to say, I will not reciprocate. Therefore, I would counter with, okay, well, I won't reciprocate. But the random group of people on an island, it sounds like you're trying to say that, well, wouldn't this be wrong to genocide a random group of people that just don't happen to reciprocate? I don't believe that there are humans that are incapable of reciprocation, much the same that I don't believe ISIS is incapable of reciprocation. ISIS just chooses not to. The genocidal group of like random human tribes people haven't had the option to say yes or no yet. So it's kind of complicated.
So they take an active and positive stance against reciprocating,
Exactly.
but they are capable of reciprocating.
Yeah.
Under this framework, should they be given any moral consideration if they are capable of reciprocating but don't?
Who?
ISIS.
No, anybody that doesn't reciprocate isn't entitled to any level of reciprocation. No.
Okay. Between a collective I wrote down like questions to like run down this because I like wrote down what you said and I wanted to like ask. But between a collective happiness and an individual happiness, in your opinion, what should take priority?
I think the two are inexorably tied together. So the way that I describe this is I think that like if we're talking utils, right? I think that one person can create 10 utils of happiness. I think that two people together can bring 50 utils of happiness. That separated, humans can't accomplish as much as they can together. Therefore, a collective interest that you like work towards will also build greater positive interest for yourself. So I think that these two things are inexorably linked because we're like a social creature. That's just how we work.
Okay, so this is a broader question about society, but should society exist to be laissez-faire, to leave one to their own devices, or should it exist to provide for happiness?
I think that society should try to maximize the happiness of every individual within society. I think that whether you're laissez-faire or more redistributive, I don't care about either of those positions intrinsically. I think there are times when being laissez-faire serves the interests of the greater good, and I think there are times where being more redistributive serves the interests of the greater good.
Okay, value. So happiness, in this sense, it's the value that's being maximized. It's the value you care about, what satisfies like personal happiness. How do you determine on like a collective level, like how do you reconcile these differences between an individual's, like no individual finds one thing happy that another, like we differ in what we find happy. What you find happy could differ from what I find happy, right? So like how do you like you round this? I'm sorry, I'm not very articulate, but how do you round this? Like how do you reconcile these differences if we value different things? Different things make us happy, and at times will be at odds. Like you can't maximize collective happiness just by maximizing an individual happiness if we're motivated by different things personally.
I think that we should. I think that I think that there are enough fundamental similarities that we have as human beings that there are certain things that we should be able to maximize for in all of society, and there are certain things that if people are not interested in maximizing for these people can be eradicated from society. So, for instance, I think that there are fundamental values of human well-being that we can all advocate for. For instance, not murdering and raping each other. If these are things that you aren't capable of understanding as making happy, then I would say that you're incompatible with any like modern version of what a society should be, or things like stealing from people, killing people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Insofar as like, so if I get to a more honest point of your question, maybe if you're asking something like, okay, well, what about some people that really want like more religion or less religion or whatever? When it comes to things like these, I would just say like how much you infringing on the right of another person to pursue their own individual happiness versus enforcing some value on them to make yourself happier. Maybe if you give me a more specific example, I can talk around it more if that answer is unsatisfying. Go for it.
No, well, I mean, well, so I kind of agree, and I kind of like thought you'd run here. Except here's where we differed. Where you ran to was something more of like from a negative rights perspective, like don't murder and don't rape doesn't really confer on anyone any individual benefits that they could have, right? But what leftists would do, and again, not them, but I'm trying to like say what I think they. There's Maslow's law of hierarchies, right? There are basic needs that every human being has that are material. You need food, you need clothing, all this good stuff. So, like now you have an issue, right? Because you have so there's positive rights here too, right? And you already agree that society should exist to provide, to maximize, society should maximize happiness rather than be laissez-faire.
Which includes some positive rights as well. For instance, everybody is probably entitled to some level of healthcare, is probably entitled to some level of housing, sure.
Sure. Okay. Then how do you establish this if there's no individuals who are willing to, I guess, sacrifice their own negative rights towards this end? Like this is
I would
basically
argue,
the
yeah,
taxation is theft meme,
sure.
but I want to see what.
I would argue that those people are incompatible with society as well. That if you take a look at how, so for instance, if there's a guy, okay, I
Would you
augment.
say ANCAPs? Like ANCAPs are incompatible with
Yeah.
society?
Okay. So I don't know if this feels like a cheat to me, but the way that I go from like an egoist thing to an altruist thing is I usually say like very selfish egoists are usually just very stupid. So for instance, if I have one person in a room with $1 million and 9 people in a room with $1, I think that I can say that the individual with 1 million should want to give the 9 other people at least $50,000 because the level of suffering that he'll endure losing $500 or $500,000 off of $10 million, whatever, is going to be far, 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 far less than the level of happiness gained by all the other people receiving that redistribution, right? Because there's like a marginal utility attached to dollars.
So this is utilitarianism then.
I mean, it's consequentialist, sure. I mean, like, I am a consequentialist. To call it utilitarianism feels weird because then you get into weird thing. I mean, we can call it utilitarianism if you want. Actually, I'll argue from that perspective if you want, sure.
Well, I don't want.
Wait, that sounded really
cheap.
cheapy. No, I'm sorry.
Consequential.
Yeah, it's a
What?
form of I'm definitely a consequentialist, normatively, for sure.
But I don't think. Okay, we'll get to that later. But
Yep.
I don't think you are.
Okay.
So I want to run down like these other ones. One thing you said. So I got like this again broken down in outline. So if I'm scatterbrained a bit, this is because this is where I wrote it down.
Yeah, no problem.
But children are not moral agents. They do not reciprocate values.
Correct.
And you argued that laws are downstream from morality.
Mm-hmm.
And the question was asked, are laws that forbid the killing of one's own child a violation of this principle? And if so, on what basis is that kind of law morally justified? And the answer you gave was 100% unsatisfactory. You gave because they're humans. I would say, so here's where you can respond. This abandons the principle you outlined in the first argument because you argued for consistency. You argued that moral value is only useful insofar as it's reciprocated, and in one clear area where it's not is in the area of children. And if moral value is offered merely because one is human, then you cannot hold the position you hold as an absolute. It's not an absolute position, right? That moral value extends even if you don't reciprocate just because you're human. Would that? Yeah, that's my beef with that first thing.
So the reason why I have to bake in the human thing is because hold on, I have to think about this quite a bit. The reason why the human thing is baked in and why it's arbitrary is because I don't think that there is any like objective reason to value one life over another. Like this is just a statement that I present on axiom that can't.
But you did offer one. You basically said on the reciprocation of values. That was the reason you provided.
But then they also have to but animals can reciprocate some values as well, right?
Can they?
Yeah, of course.
What values do animals reciprocate to me?
Companionship. I mean, you can have a common interest in something. Dogs can help you shepherd things. I mean, some level of emotional connection. Like, what do you mean? Yeah, I think animals reciprocate for sure.
I guess this value of maximizing happiness. It seems like if we're looking at our relationship with animals and we're trying to parallel that with like a relationship with humans, animals are tools. They exist for utility, right? They're not like moral agents that can understand or I don't think I agree at all that they can reciprocate our values. I think we use them, right? I mean, I guess you might call it contractual, but anytime we want, we could kill every dog in the world and be none the worse for it. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not sure I agreed with this.
I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with you, but you can run that argument back to like ethnic populations as well. We could kill every ethnic group in the world and not be worse off for it. No?
No, because ethnic groups can reciprocate values because
but if you're saying literally just be worse off for it, I mean, you could theoretically exterminate any group of people and not be worse off for it, regardless of whether or not they reciprocate values. No?
Yeah, you're right. Okay, so to test this, right? You argued that like non-moral actors, and the examples you gave were like a person who was like had a mental illness or children, right? And you said they are extensions of another's property. Should trading or selling people as one would any other property be morally permissible if this is your framework? Like basically, is slavery wrong?
Yeah. So like it seems to me this is this gets very general, and I could see arguments coming in that undermine this position. It seems to me that when it comes to forming social contracts with people, the best way to do it is all or nothing. It seems really hard to start picking or choosing types of humans that we should reciprocate with, because once you've started picking and choosing, it seems like arbitrary that at some point you could wind up being picked and chosen. So one example of this I would give is if I was arguing against a white nationalist. He says, I think we should only let people into this country that are white. Well, it's like, okay, do you think that's like philosophically defensible? Yeah, I think that people that share a common ancestry with me and have a certain appearance that's similar to me, those people ought to be defended. Okay, fine. And there should be a preference for that. Okay, cool. That's fine. So let's say that you do that. We get rid of all the browns, all the blacks, all the horrible people, blah, blah, blah. Now we just have our pure Aryan race in the country. Well, let's say that the next person says, okay, now that we've gotten rid of all the dark-skinned people, I think we ought to get rid of everybody with brown eyes. What reasonable defense would you have to not get rid of all the brown-eyed people if you already said we can get rid of all the brown-skinned people? Because it seems like you don't really have, like, you're drawing these arbitrary lines at, like, what people you should or shouldn't accept. So it seems to me that it's the easiest statement to assert axiomatically that gets every single person equally invested in your system is all human life ought to be protected. And then I just have, like, a hard, that I assert that without justification. It literally is just axiomatic, like, all human life ought to be valued, and then I kind of work from there. I don't really have a great way of justifying that other than kind of what I just said, that starting from any other point seems to lead into absurdity where we can draw arbitrary distinction between any type of person that could be eliminated. So that's where I start.
Yeah, this seems almost entirely axiomatic. Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree that you don't. So there's a slippery slope problem here.
Slip me, baby.
Well, no, you've described the slope. We've slipped, babe. You went down it. You're like, if we kill everyone who's not Aryans, now we got to get rid of people with like brown eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally understand this, but I'm wondering how you reconcile this with your previous position. If it's axiomatic, I'm sorry, if it's not being universally applied,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I'm screwing up. If it's being universally applied,
okay,
right, even though those values aren't being reciprocated, how do you reconcile these odds, right? Because obviously it's not arbitrary.
Being universally applied. Well, wait. What do you?
Yeah, you can't say it's arbitrary. That you've already established a basis, right? The reciprocation of these values was the basis, so it's not arbitrary. Like in theory, it would be perfectly permissible for the Aryan to wipe out, the brown-eyed people if they weren't reciprocating whatever these values were.
Well, wait. Are you like? I'm interpreting this for using, like, I'm using this as like an and statement, not an or statement, right? So like the first thing is you have to be some sort of human, and you have to like reciprocate values. But if you revoke either of these things, then the contract kind of falls apart, right? So you can be human, but if you don't reciprocate values, I mean, any successful tit-for-tat system is going to invoke some level of punishment to survive, right? I can't just exist alongside a person that's constantly raping me, killing my family, and stealing my possessions, right?
Sure. Would you ever say these values are, I guess I'd say collective? Like, are people individuals or are people part of society? Like, can you say nations or states like don't reciprocate your values?
Well, I mean, both of those are true. What do you mean? There are nations and there are peoples. There are individuals and.
Yeah, but is a nation a collective for which individuals belong to, and thus you can group them together, or are individuals just individuals, and ultimately we are all, I don't know, like how you'd put it, but I mean, like
that question is very complicated.
We get into a yeah.
That question is very complicated, and it gets into like forms of government and then levels of responsibility. So, like, for instance,
you're arguing for the social contract.
Sure, I can. I'm just saying that I can't give you a broad answer to that. So, for instance, let's say because where I would go with this is like how. Like, at what level of here about this? Okay, a family is killed in Yemen from a drone strike. What level of responsibility does an American have for that? Right. Well, I think that level of responsibility is going to be a lot different than the level of responsibility like an Iranian or a North Korean citizen could have. Right. Because as an American, we have more input in our government than people in those two countries. Right. However, but I mean, yeah, go ahead.
But why is that? Well, I mean, because one is it's not just because it's structured that way. Like, ultimately, aren't our states just made up of the consent of the governed, like in North Korea?
Well, but a dictatorship is obviously far different in terms of consent of the governed versus a democratic body, right? Like,
right. So, I mean, where do all states derive their power? If it's a minority wielding violence, I mean, it's different levels of responsibility. I mean, I don't disagree with that.
Wait, so what's the question?
Alert Pepe hands.
Oh, you asked a hypothetical, like if a family is killed in Yemen for,
Oh yeah, I'm
in a
saying that
drone
like so
strike,
a citizen in a
whose
democratically
heirs
elected government is going to have a different level of responsibility than a citizen in like an authoritarian dictatorship, I would say.
would you say you have so then would you say you are in some way responsible personally for like people who've been killed in drone strikes?
Um, I personally, as part of a collective, I think there is some level of responsibility there. Yeah, not it wouldn't be quite the same as me killing a Yemeni person, like, but yeah, I
Yeah,
think
but
there is some
it's a
level.
responsibility spectrum, right? Like obviously you're not as responsible as the
Yeah,
guy
I
launching the
agree.
drone.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm
So
just
like I
so
don't
I
get
mean
unfortunately I don't get credit for this anymore because other people have said it hotter than me. But like so for instance, like I don't think that things like 9/11 are so unbelievable to say that like this could have been some level of justified response to American foreign policy. I don't think that's an unbelievable statement. I think that in some ways that could even be like a quite easily defensible statement that certain terrorist attacks might be responses to American aggression against other countries. So that's possible to say.
oof. I don't want to get in. Well, I don't think that's true with the 9/11 example. I can tell you why, but it would take us like off this path.
Can you give me a Cliff Notes
You
version?
yeah, the Cliff Notes version is that the 9/11 attack was largely in response to us having bases in Saudi Arabia near holy cities. This was upsetting to Osama bin Laden. This is the Cliff Notes version for why this isn't really valid is we were asked by the Saudi government to be there in response to Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait. There was a lot of fear at the time that Saddam Hussein might take on Saudi Arabia next. So we were basically invited. Point one and point two. I don't know that you can really like rationalize religious fanaticism. I don't think like the motivations of religious fanatics are very good motivations. Like for them, it was just where we were on a geographic location and nothing else. Even if our intentions were
Okay,
good,
okay, so we might have a underlying oh, fuck, I see why this is a whole other thing. I totally disagree. I would never characterize Osama bin Laden's aggression against the United States as religious fanaticism. Like if you read like his fatwas, he literally goes into like aggressions that America has committed in Palestine, aggressions in like Somalia. There are other things that he talked about how
I can even address those.
What?
I mean, they're perfectly valid. Well, the aggression he lists in Somalia was in response to Mohammed Farah Aidid's. This was a warlord who was like stealing UN food aid during like the 19 like there was this Somalia descended into a state of civil war from like 1989 to like 19. Well, I think it's still technically ongoing. But I mean, there was this warlord who kept stealing food aid to a region that was starving. Like that was the basis of like to call that even American aggression seems like a reach. Like what would you call anybody interpreting that as anything other than religious fanaticism?
Fuck, I don't know if we want to go down. I just I hold on. Fuck, I don't know if I want to go.
We can get off this.
Sure, yeah,
this,
I'm sorry. Like,
because
there's like 15 million other things where that Osama or not or I'm not Osama, sorry. Osama. That Bin Laden lists like in his things. Hold on, let me see if I can fucking find.
This is totally off the thing.
It's super off. I don't like the characterization of it as just literally like religious fanaticism. But maybe you would explain every single point that he would give as like religious fanaticism, I guess.
I don't know, maybe.
Supported the Russian atrocities against us in Chechnya, the Indian oppression against us in Kashmir, the Jewish aggression against us in Lebanon, under his supervision, consent and orders, governments of our countries which act as your agents, attack us on a daily basis. These governments prevent us from allowing our people to establish Islamic Sharia, which using violence allows us to do so. These governments give us a taste of humiliation and place us in a large prison of fear and subdual. These governments steal our ummah's wealth and sell them to you at a paltry price. These governments surrender the Jews, handed them most of Palestine, acknowledge the existence of their state over blah blah blah. Rule these governments, you steal our wealth and oil. Theft is indeed the biggest. You spread your military bases throughout them, corrupt our lands, besiege our sanctities, protect the security of the Jews, and to ensure the community of our pillage. Like, do you think that all of this is like the only foundation for this is just like I am religious, so
this is the raving of like Alex Jones with his own like religious army. Yeah, like surrendering your government to the Jews and stealing your oil at a paltry price. That sounds like the ravings of a madman who doesn't know what he's talking.
You don't think
about.
it could sound like the ravings of like if we dial back a little bit of the religious like fanaticism, the idea that the United States does support Israel in the Middle East, and the idea that we do it against other states in the Middle East that might have a huge problem with that have like massive territorial wars related to these people. So, for instance, like
you've pushed the problem back a step. Like now, why would they have a problem with it? And now we got to get to the individual issue. And in some cases, I mean, sorry to say, some cases, Israel is like the good guy in a certain conflict. That's so reductive of a way to put it.
But I mean, would we say Israel is the good guy against the
Palestinians? No, I wouldn't say that. But I'm saying that there are.
But the
was
U.S.
referring to
like
Yom Kippur in
avowedly
particular.
backs that. We 100%. Israel is one of our closest allies in the Middle East. But if we saw Syria treating Palestinians the way that Israel does, we would use that as an excuse to dethrone Assad.
I
Like,
wish we would use it as an excuse to dethrone Assad.
but I'm just saying that like that I don't think it's fair to just say this is all religious fanaticism. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that like I think that I think that this is that the U.S. is evil, blah blah blah, and we deserve 9/11. I'm just saying that like I think there are understandable responses for the foreign policy decisions we have, and I don't think it's fair to chalk all of it up into just saying it's all religion.
There's an obvious religious like tone to it. I don't know, like, I mean, I guess I think we're just gonna disagree on this, but I maybe you see it as overly reductive to call it like the ravings of religious fanaticism. But I see religion as like the I don't know what you'd call it, but like the catalyst for like all of these grudges. It's distinctly religious.
I guess it's interesting to me. I guess maybe I'm too tainted because of all the random shit that I've read about the Middle East. But it feels to me like religion might be one lens through which you can view it, but it's not very explanatory of everything that's happening. Whereas if we just go geopolitical, like things become much more clear in terms of why people are at conflict or at ends with each other. So for instance, like in the United States, we talk about religion all the time. God commands me to do this. Trump said my favorite book is the Bible. It's the most important book in the world. Bush said that God, I prayed to God and I went to war in the Middle East. But we would never say that like the U.S. does holy wars. We would never say the U.S. is on a crusade or that the U.S. is like using religion to attack the Middle East, right? Like these are like geopolitical issues.
I mean, yes and no. You can't deny the religious element to any of these, like precisely for the reasons you
Because
just
I'm putting
listed.
100%.
Oh, okay, maybe. Well, okay, fuck. Yeah, this is a whole other thing to get off to. I wouldn't characterize any of the U.S. action in the Middle East as being instigated by religion. I think all of it comes down to territorial control, like geopolitical issues.
Do you think any of the xenophobia or Islamophobia coming from the right has anything to do with religion?
I think that they can weaponize that for it, but like if we wanted to use Islamophobia, okay, here are some things. So let's say that we hate Muslims, okay, on the right. That is partially true, right? And then let's also say that we weaponize that to go to war, right? Why do we only do it in the Middle East? There are so many Muslim majority countries in Africa that we can weaponize that. We can go to fucking, I think, Somalia, Sudan. Like there's a lot of sub-Saharan where there's a lot of Muslims. We could go there and like fucking kill a whole bunch of people that are committing like pretty bad atrocities. But we don't give a fuck about that. Why?
I mean, we do go into all of these places.
Hold on. You're being very dishonest. I'm not saying you are, but like we do not have the same level of interest in places like sub-Saharan Africa as we do in the Middle East.
Based on the obviously this scales on the basis of our geopolitical interests. I'm saying that we do have a presence in these places. As part of our counter-terror operations, in order to assist our allies, and all of these things that the right might justify on the basis of Islamophobia, even though the geopolitical situation is very different in Libya or very different in Egypt from what it is in Iran or what it is in Saudi Arabia.
Sure.
Who's our allies? But I mean, like, you'll find the right, like, will just block these people together as if they're a monolith.
Yeah,
like,
sometimes they do. Yeah, they do, and they're dumb. But when it comes to how we actually function in the Middle East, even the most crazy right people are acting in government far differently than what they're saying, like, politically, right? For instance, if we had the opportunity to get rid of Assad, we would do it 1,000,000%. He's evil. He gasses people with chemical weapons, and he represents a threat to the Middle East, and he's a horrible Muslim. However, every single thing I just said 100% applies to Saddam Hussein, and we literally kept him in power. Like, there's no way to explain that other than, okay, geopolitical interest. I almost said Hassan. Saddam Hussein represents
a change of administration.
Well, Saddam Hussein represents U.S. geopolitical interest stability in the Middle East. So we were okay with Saddam Hussein. The only way you can explain that is if the geopolitical interest is overriding whatever Islamophobia, Muslimphobia, or religious bullshit that the right claims to be hyped up on. But it seems to be that geopolitical is more fervently followed than religious.
I think we're talking past each other. I think we both agree on the same thing. Like, you're not going to deny a religious like overtone to it, and I'm not going to deny the geopolitical element that's like prevailing either. Like, these are we're talking past each other.
Sure. Okay. Anyway, sorry. Well, okay. So run all that back. Responsibility of individuals of a country, I think.
Yeah, we're taking a hard U-turn. Damn, was it the responsibility of individuals I left off on?
Or it sounded
What
like
I
you
have
were going to
written
try to
here
get
was-
me on like, what is the culpability of an individual for a government action? Which is a good question, I think. But go ahead. That's what it sounded like we were going to. But go ahead.
No, I think that's a fair question because we're establishing like, well, I mean, what you argued, I think, was in a defense of the social contract. So I think like there is a collective. If you believe in it, then you have to agree with a collective responsibility for how this contract is carried out.
Sure.
Even if you might be in the minority opinion as far as that contract goes.
Okay.
But I'm confused because the last thing I wrote, the last thing I wrote was the same reason all values are eventually reciprocated, even if one individually agrees with them, is the application of violence. The very existence of the state decreases personal happiness of anarchists, but they're still given moral worth by the state against their will. I don't know why that was what I wrote, so I don't know where we left off on.
I mean, anarchists, I mean, if it seems like if you're an anarchist, but you live in a society today, it seems like you're probably capable of reciprocating, so you get to stay, I guess, yeah. But if you started to act out your principles, then obviously
They're trying. Well, their principles are like the complete destruction of the social contract.
But they're working. If they're working within the system to do it, and then they can enact their own contract, then I guess that later on they would be seen differently, right? If they created a perfect anarchist society, I guess. But as long as they don't violate any of the currently held social norms, then that's fine.
Well, here's the question: like, how long should these be tolerated if you know that their end goal is the eventual destruction of this contract you already live by and value?
I mean, I think if the end goal is something that I would consider exactly, 100%, yeah. I think that if that's your end goal, then I would resist you with whatever means possible within the system. If it seems like the system isn't working, then you would take extra system measures to do it.
So is this is really just dependent on their capabilities then?
Yeah, basically, yeah. So like, I don't think that like ANCOMs or whatever represent like a realistic threat. So I don't think they should be like acted upon in that.
Okay, so I want to put a pin on that because that seems to be. There's a principle called the principle of proportionality that applies in warfare, but I think you can like extend it, to your argument about like shooting rioters and things like that too. And I want to like touch on that later. The other question I asked, I'm sorry, this is again, I'm going down my list. If liability rests on the owners of children, and I put owners because you refer to children as property, for the destruction their children cause, should this extend to criminal liabilities if a child commits murder in much the same way the owner of a dog is criminally culpable if their dog kills somebody?
So the argument that I would say is that children aren't capable of committing murder, but if they were to commit an act like that, that the parent, to some extent, could be held liable.
What does a child do? Like, how old is somebody before they're
so this is where we have to get into like what that means, because like I think a 17-year-old could probably commit murder. I would have to draw that age at probably an earlier like 12 or 13 or something.
So if a 13-year-old goes and commits a mass shooting, fully aware of what they're doing, but they're not considered moral agents.
I don't know if a 13-year-old could really have that level of cognizance. Like, I don't think so.
Okay.
And then
I mean, it's like we need to talk about Kevin levels of area now. But.
Yeah, maybe. And then I would also like for the parents to be held responsible, they would have to take like reasonable precautions against something too, which would also be something you'd have to talk about. So for instance, let's say that I park my car in my driveway. Let's say that like a lightning bolt comes down, disables my car system, a giant gust of wind blows it into a neighbor's house, and it kills their kid. I mean, like, I think I took reasonable precautions to secure my car. I don't think that that's my fault. Much the same way that, like, let's say that
there's a wild difference between an act of God here.
No, I agree. Here's the thing. Let's say that you have like a 12-year-old child that's constantly hitting kids in school, displays antisocial behavior tendencies, is constantly doing all that, and the parents are taking no steps to mitigate the behavior, then I think they would be responsible for the outcome of some horrible shooting or whatever. But let's say that you have like a 13-year-old that on all intents and purposes, he's Yagami light, he looks like a pure holy child, that's good, but like in the background, he's being like ultra secretly radicalized somehow, and the parents are no way cognizant of it, then there would be a different level of responsibility there. That's what I'm saying. Okay.
Okay. So I'm just curious. We didn't seem to address this. Parents do accept like responsibility for a criminal responsibility, basically on the basis of how little or how much action they take to prevent or mitigate harm.
Yes, I think that must be the case. Yeah.
Okay, and if the parent takes no responsibility and little Junior goes out with his AR-15 and clocks like 15 kids, what are the parents? What like under this system? Like, what would you say the parents are? Are they responsible for like all 15 deaths? Like,
yeah, I would say so. They should be held liable for whatever the act of the child is. Yeah.
Well, I mean, like criminally.
Well, You're asking me to apply some values within the current system versus like what an ideal system would be. So an ideal way, fuck, I feel like we're bringing so much. I'm not trying to run you down any weird roads. I don't believe in punishment as a concept. I only believe in rehabilitation. So technically, like in an ideal society that I would have, parents would be forcibly rehabilitated if they're like raising kids that are growing up to be mass murderers or whatever. I don't necessarily believe in like killing a parent because of something their kid did or that kind of punishment. I think punishment is a really stupid concept when it comes to judicial or legal stuff. But in
probably
like
a dumb question, but how do you rehabilitate the parent? Like send them to parenting classes? Their junior already killed somebody. Like,
well, they're doing something in their household that's leading their kids to growing up to becoming murderers. So there's got to be some level of like, I don't think every parent is going to produce a murderer as a child. So there must be some level of rehabilitation that's necessary to like make the parent like raise kids that are in line with the values that we have in society. Yeah.
So if you accept the idea that like people are generally products of their environment, why don't you apply the same logic to like the 17-year-old or the 20-year-old or the 24-year-old? Like ultimately, like these people are you are.
Yeah, they're the most
weren't held responsible after like 13 or something.
Or wait, what?
I thought you said like at 17, like the parents wouldn't be held like criminally responsible or anything like that. Like,
you're saying once they've passed that threshold age, why don't I excuse their environment anymore?
Yeah, presumably somebody's shaped by their childhood who grows up to be a murderer.
Yeah, I understand.
Like,
yeah, so morally, there's this concept. It's called. Have you ever heard of the term compatibilism?
No.
So basically,
explain it to me.
That's fine. Basically, the idea is that like I recognize that on a physics level, determinism is probably true, or I function as such. I agree that that's true. However, when it comes to ethics, we kind of have to analyze people as having free will or having some level of choice.
It's like rural utilitarianism, then, or
no? It's just a way that we talk about choices. Even though I kind of sort of technically believe we don't ever truly have a choice we can make in life because I believe in causality, blah 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 blah. We still have to be able to treat people as though they have choices. We can't just go through all of society saying like, oh, you're determined, because it leads to like absurdity. So we have to hold you responsible for your actions at some age. At some age, you have to be considered.
Is that ethical though?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, you have to be able to. Yeah.
Even though you know that there is no such thing as free will, you're just doing it because you don't want to be like you don't want something reduced to an absurdity.
Yeah, the problem is if we reduce things to absurdity, it becomes kind of like incompatible for human existence. So we kind of have to like say like, okay, well, we're gonna like just do this thing, right?
Okay.
Like, for instance, like, I don't think there's any objective purpose in life. But, like, we kind of have to, we live every day assuming there's some kind of purpose, right? Like, so it seems
Do
like...
we?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Whether it's to be happy or whether it's for some religious reason or whether it's serving your government or whatever, like, yeah.
My parents had sex 30 years ago, and now I got to work for a living. Like, I don't know what purpose there was.
Well, it's a big antinatalist approach, but yeah, I mean...
Maybe I'm a little antinatalist.
Sure. That's
Okay, so during the discussion, during another discussion, this was separate from the video.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so you were talking to Chud Logic, and so this is where I want to probe your consequentialism and see how far this goes. You stated in your video, a good rule for society is no stealing, right? Rules are what maximize personal happiness, and that this is ultimately like a property argument. And Chud Logic's argument, he proposed this thought experiment to you, right?
Yeah.
Basically, if Walmart were to destroy somebody's livelihoods, would it be okay for a business owner whose livelihood was being destroyed by Walmart to take action against Walmart? And what you said was no, because they're competing under the rules of the system that we've established.
Yeah.
Right. In fact, I wrote down what you said. I don't think under any system rioting against private property can be okay. Rioting against public property can be. Okay, so
unless, to be clear, two quick things. One, if that property aggresses on you in some manner, then it can be okay. So, for instance, if somebody's using like a Walmart as a base of operations to attack protesters, then it's okay, of course. And then,
how is Walmart not aggressing on you when they're taking actions that they know will put you out of business?
So, I believe that when you enter a system, you consent to the rules of that system, and you can't aggress on others by entering a system that you consented into joining. So, when I open a business, I'm kind of explicitly consenting to the rules of being in business, which is that if somebody comes in and sells a product at a cheaper price to me, then they can, take action. Yeah.
Would you really say you enter into this system? You're born into a capitalist system.
You're not born into owning a business.
Right, but your options are either what the left would call wage slavery or capitalism, right? Being the capitalist.
Uh-huh.
Right. So, I mean, obviously you're going to take the system, you're going to take the route which like maximizes your well-being, your personal well-being. And then if you've got the capital for it, that is being a business owner. But these risks apply here for the worker in much the same way they apply for the arguably less than what they would apply for the capitalist. But the argument is the same, right? Somebody's livelihood is being destroyed.
Yeah, but it matters how that livelihood is being destroyed. That's incredibly important. If they consented to the possibility of that, then they kind of have to live with the results of that.
Okay, so here's why I don't agree with this. Um, I don't think under this system you're on a level playing field, and I think legitimate competition requires an equal playing field. Right? It's why able-bodied people can't compete in the Special Olympics, or
Mm-hmm.
why doping is illegal. And I don't think you'll deny Walmart wields a far greater command of infrastructure and capital influence than any other business owner does.
Sure.
And from that, Walmart's not on competing on equal ground.
Sure. But this is why hopefully we craft laws that make it a little bit more competitive if we were able to do that, if it benefits all of society. Yeah.
And what if like not these laws fail? What if like society fails to enact these laws? Should like the business owner just sit there and take it, like his livelihood being destroyed?
Well, if the business owner wants, he can like fight back if he feels like it's unfair. But then Walmart would be right in defending itself too. So you could get into the situation where small business owners are taking up arms against Walmart, and Walmart starts hiring private like Mercs or private military companies.
Yeah, man, that's precisely where I'm going. Is the application of violence.
Sure. Yeah. So I don't think that's a good way. So it probably makes more sense to work within the democratic system we have right now to reform those laws to more closely match, I guess, what would be a more desirable state, rather than everybody just killing each other over it, right?
But you've got an issue with this democratic system. Like, there's a huge power imbalance between property owners and capital owners and non-property owners and non-capital owners.
Okay, so the conversation might die here. I don't agree that that imbalance exists.
You don't?
No.
You don't think like the having resources like can help you game democracy in any way?
No, I don't think so. I'm not convinced of that. I used to be, but I don't think I'm convinced of that at this point.
Okay. So can I? I want to parallel this with police violence, right? Because there is no situation where rioting and destroying private property is ever okay. If the state fails to bring about change in this system, even though you don't agree that this power imbalance exists, but there's people who want change and they're not getting it, right? But destroying capital brings about change. Whose happiness should prevail here between like an unhappy collective and a happy capitalist?
Well, I mean, if there is a law that you feel is unjust and democratically there is no response to that, whether because the political will isn't there for whatever reason, then I think that you could like have your own justification for going to war, I guess, kind of against the system in whatever way for this particular thing, right? I think that's possible, yeah. And then either you're crushed and then your ideology is stamped out, or you succeed and your ideology becomes the new norm. So, for instance, when we
that's almost tautological. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Can I
go?
Okay, so I mean so then it seems like you don't agree with what you said when you said that you don't think there's any circumstances where rioting is okay. That there are certain circumstances. It just depends on your frame of reference. That if you are the have-nots in society and you can't get the change you need, that it's perfectly okay to appeal to violence in a way that like inspires change, even if that violence might detract from societal happiness.
I mean, if you feel like that's the only way, I just disagree with all those underlying descriptive claims. But I mean, like, I mean, theoretically, I guess, yeah. I mean, you could feel justified in it, sure. I mean, you could feel justified in anything, technically, right? But I mean, I'm talking about within the frame of the American system right now. I don't think that you can ever justify rioting. But I mean, if you're coming like at a super outside way, like the whole system needs to be burned or something like that, then yeah, I mean, I guess you could. Theoretically, if you ask me, like, could this be justified? I mean, well, if we talk about other people's systems, anything could be justified, right?
Yeah, I mean anything could. I'm trying to like probe what you think is justified, though. You argued nothing. Rioting against private property can't ever be justified because it doesn't maximize personal happiness. It's not reciprocating these private property values. All this stuff. But I think a lot of again, I'm totally off script here. But there are visible changes that happen as a result of rioting and this destruction of private property. If I had to point to an example, I would point to the LA riots. As a real world example where there was massive changes internally to the LA Police Department as a result of this widespread destruction and violence that killed a lot of people, unfortunately.
Yeah, but I feel like we would have to go back to like, because there are times when riots have been good and times when riots have been bad. We'd have to tease out like, when do riots follow public opinion? When do public opinions follow riots? Because we can also point to the fact that Nixon probably won the election and started the war on drugs after the riots of MLK's assassination, which has been some of the worst like atrocities committed against like black populations in the entire history of the United States. So I mean, like we can go like either way with that, and yeah, I don't know.
I mean, if this, I kind of like by definition they all can't follow public opinion, or like if you really believe in a democratic system where capital doesn't make an impediment to people's votes, right? And it seems like if public opinion was like police violence is bad, or well, I should tune my language, police brutality is bad. right, that they would like enact change to do it. The issue that spurs the riots is that there's not this change that's necessary,
Well, what I'm
even though
saying is
public
like
opinion might be on
what I'm
one
saying is
side.
that public opinion could be boiling over, and this change will come, and then riots happen, and then the change does come. I don't think it's fair to say the riots caused the change, rather that it was. It might be possible that riots maybe make it happen a year or two earlier. It just depends. But like, I don't think it's fair to say that like the American public was 30-70, then the riots happened, and now they're like 60-40. Like, I don't think that that's ever happened in the history of the U.S.
No, that's a little reductive as a way to put it. But I mean, like, there's utility to riots, right? Is what I'm arguing is that like it brings a lot of attention,
Yeah.
or it even motivates people to make these changes that are necessary.
I disagree. Maybe this would be like an argument to have, but like it doesn't seem to be the case. It seems to be the case that like peaceful protesting, especially when police are being violent towards peaceful protesters, that's what brings like very positive attention to your movement. But as soon as it turns into rioting and innocent like third parties are being caught in the crossfires, then it seems like whatever you're protesting for starts to take on a much more negative and sinister appearance to the public. That's my problem with rioting, is it doesn't seem to be very politically efficacious.
I mean, you had draft riots in response to the Vietnam War that, like, I mean, the Vietnam War was a hugely unpopular war. Like, I'm not so sure, like, historically, that this is true.
I mean, we could. I don't know. I guess we'd have to point.
Well, I mean, that's just a one-off example.
Yeah,
I mean,
no, I
like,
understand. It's just like I've been presented
really
with like a few examples where there were riots and they didn't do much for public opinion, and they caused like what we would consider to be negative outcomes. The most well-known thing I can think of is the Nixon election might have literally came exactly from the riots. That certain districts were depressed, where the rioting was the heaviest, and that's where Nixon won, where he needed to win to become elected. Like that's like the number one example that I have in my mind. I've heard some other things.
I thought the Vietnam War had more to do with the Nixon election.
Possibly, but like these particular areas that were depressed were really, really important for his, for his election. But like, I don't know. We would have to go back and look to. I just don't know enough. I can't say. But my understanding is that riots. The general understanding is that when peaceful protest, I think it was David Shore wrote an article on this that I was reading. That the general understanding I think that he had given was that like when riots happen that are peaceful, especially when the police come out against those people and you get videos of peaceful protesters being hurt by the police, you gain massive political support for that movement. But as soon as your protests turn violent, when shit is being burned down, you absolutely sink. And I think that that's like, I hate to appeal to this, but I think intuitively that's probably true. Very few Americans like to turn on a TV and watch like neighborhoods on fire. That doesn't, except for the most extreme people you find, that's not gonna make most people feel good. And for instance, when we appeal to polling data about like how do you feel about the police, like we find that even like African Americans in general like want police in neighborhoods. This idea that like they all hate them or whatever is just not really that true. So that's kind of what I'm appealing to, I guess.
Yeah, but it's also true that they all like widely want reform that they're just not getting. Like there's a wide like array of like different police reforms that have constantly been called for that even in this democratic system haven't been happening. Like we still consistently have issues with the way police are trained, with respect to police brutality, the amount of police homicides that happen every year. Even like de-escalation training is still like really hard to get, or even like body worn cameras. You'd be surprised. Like there's a lot of like pushback against something like that, even like on a like, even though it's really popular, you find a lot of people don't want that.
Yeah, I know. All of it just gets really complicated. So for instance, like when it comes to police body cams, like a lot of people I don't think the problem with police reform is a lot of people don't know what they want. Here's a couple of reality checks that a lot of people don't realize, okay? One, police reform is done at the local level. You're never going to vote for a president that's going to fix the police. End of discussion, full stop. I'll stake my life on that. It just won't happen. That's not how police policy is done. So that's number one, okay? Number two, nobody votes in local elections to do this. So for instance, we cry about the LAPD all the time, 20% turnout in our mayoral elections. And it's not because of voter suppression, because when the general rolls around, you get 40, 50, 60% participation. So it's not voter suppression, it's not gerrymandering, it's literally just people don't give a fuck about local elections, okay? Those are two things. Number three, a lot of people say things like, we need to reduce funding to the police department. Okay, cool. Number four, a lot of people want body cams. That requires a massive investment in infrastructure government. Do you want to increase funding or do you want to decrease funding? A lot of people say things like, oh, we need more training for cops so they handle issues more responsibly. Okay, that's another massive increase in funding. You know, like a lot of people point to like Camden, New Jersey. Oh, well, look at what they did. They got rid of the city police department and they just used the district or the county police. They doubled the size of the county police department and they have way more police on the streets doing policing. They just do a different type of policing, right? So I think that when it comes to like people want changes, the problem is they just don't know what they want. And that's what makes the policy decisions so fucking hard. It's kind of like Brexit. Everybody wanted to Brexit, but they didn't know how they wanted to Brexit. And now they're like, holy shit, what the fuck do we do? Sorry, I talked a lot. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with any of that. I'm just wondering if like rioting could be, if it has any like positive utility to getting any of these.
I think
people don't know what they want, but I don't
think
like rioters have a lot of. I'm sorry, what's that?
If there was like a clear thing they wanted, I think maybe the answer could be yes. If it was like, we want this thing, we're going to burn shit down until we get it, then sure. But right now, I don't know what the fuck protesters or rioters want necessarily. I have no fucking
when
idea.
you say, well, I'm sorry, when you say sure, does this like betray your consequentialist like framework then?
Not necessarily. Well, it might change the weighting a little bit. I don't know if you caught how much of my initial conversation caught, but one of the big reasons why I'm against rioting is because I believe it to be politically ineffective. Or I'm sorry, politically ineffective.
Oh shit! I didn't hear what you said.
I'm sorry.
Like you just lagged out. Or
Wait,
I
okay, I'm
lagged
sorry.
out.
I was thinking effective with an A. It seems to be politically ineffective. Is like my big problem with like rioting. It doesn't get what you want done, and then it like threatens like individual property rights and everything.
But if it was politically effective, would that change your view on it?
It might a little bit. It's unlikely because you're still talking about throwing some people into the fire for the sake of political effectiveness. But yeah, it probably wouldn't. But but that's what I focus on right now when I talk about it, is that I think it's a really politically effective way to get things done. Ineffective way to get things done. Sorry.
Okay. So to continue on with the Walmart thing, one argument you brought was there's a difference between there's a distinction, doing and allowing distinction when it comes to harm. That there's a difference between actively hurting somebody else's well-being and just allowing somebody to be harmed, right?
It's different. Wait, real quick, just so it doesn't sound like I'm weaseling. It is different, but that doesn't make one okay and one not okay. All right, go ahead.
Yeah. Although I don't think that even saves you. I don't.
No, I'm not saying it saves you. I just don't want to say so it doesn't. So, for instance, like if I drown a child, that's wrong. If I just watch a child drown in front of me, that's also wrong. But these two things are way fucking different. But they're both wrong.
That's precisely what I'm getting. Well, yeah, it's different. Like that when somebody torches your business than when Walmart just runs you out. But the consequence is the same. So we're looking at this from like a consequence-oriented like framework. Is there really a distinction between doing and allowing if the consequences are the same?
Absolutely, because it's predictive of future behavior. If Walmart outproduces somebody or outcompetes somebody and they go bankrupt, then that means that Walmart is going to outproduce and bankrupt people. Okay, that's fine. That's part of how we accept and agree that our system should work. But if Walmart moves in and is like threatening the boss or like beating up employees or some shit, okay, well, that's not good. And that's predictive of future bad behavior. So that shouldn't be allowed.
Okay, so here's why I don't think that works. Walmart is an active participant in that harm. They know when they open up a business somewhere that they're going to destroy somebody's livelihood in much the same way the guy throwing the Molotov cocktail knows it too, right?
Well, but the difference is that the Molotov cocktail is illegal. We don't accept that's a part of how we run our system. Whereas for Walmart, we accept that businesses can open and you're not allowed to like be a monopoly owner on a street or whatever. So that's not. So that's like, yeah, Walmart is playing by the rules of the business that we have set up.
Okay. I'm just not sure. Well, I don't disagree. I just think like most people wouldn't disagree that those rules are pretty illegitimate because they game like the system in question well in the favor of Walmart. And if I can bring back like the Special Olympics analogy earlier, it's the same thing. Walmart is like Usain Bolt in the Special Olympics.
Yeah, but I guess like the question would be, are you saying small business owners are retarded? Sorry. Okay.
In a way.
No. Okay. So like the question would be that like, and this is a hard one because this is where we get bogged down so much, and why it's so frustrating for me to have these conversations. Not with you in particular. I'm sorry. I don't mean to imply that. But like, what changes ought we make that makes Walmart less competitive that doesn't also destroy the fuck out of small businesses? Like that's a really hard question to answer. I feel.
Yeah, if you want like a specific policy change, I couldn't answer it to you. But I'm wondering if, like, on the principle, so we're here at the personal happiness and collective happiness meme again, right? Whose happiness should like take precedence here? Like, Walmart employs way more people than that small business is ever going to do. They've got their money in a lot more pockets than that small business is ever going to do. And undoubtedly, they provide cheap goods to poor neighborhoods. Like
so then my question is like, why should we value the small business owner that's probably going to create more pollution and cause more economic harm to an area because their goods and services are going to be more? Why do we value that person over the Walmart, assuming the Walmart is playing by like an agreeable set of rules?
I don't, but the business owner, like, I don't think he'll see a difference. Is my
but fuck, I don't care about the business owner. Fuck the business owner. Why would I care about him?
Because he's going to torch Walmart. For the same reason he's going to shoot the rider.
But this small business owner is not reciprocating the social contract, then, right?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, so fuck him. So I don't care about him.
Okay. Okay, so this is the other question I have written down for this part. Is the doing and allowing distinction incompatible with consequentialism? I'm sorry, did I already ask that?
No, not really, but we've kind of talked around it. So I think doing and allowing, the difference between doing and allowing harm, I think is an important thing to keep in mind because it is important to analyze for predictive. It is predictive of future behaviors. That's why I think doing versus allowing is different. So for instance, if there is a person in society that runs around and watches children drown, I think that's pretty bad. You're a pretty shitty person. Like, fuck you. But if there's a person that runs around in society and drowns children at pools, this guy needs to be killed. This guy needs to be stopped. We can't have people that run around in pools and drown children. That's fucking horrible. We can't have that, right? So like even though the consequence of both these individuals' actions are the same in one instance, oh man, he watched a child drown versus he's drowning kids, the difference is their actions in the future. So this is why the rules that we would craft in terms of who's acceptable in society, like somebody that allows harm is probably okay to keep around, even if we should aspire to higher standards. But the person that's actively going around and committing harm, we have to get rid of all these people. It's not good.
Okay, so I'm going to see this as like more utilitarian then. To probe this, right, you could violate these norms then if there is a necessity to do it, even if it goes against these established rules. Take, for example, it would be, or I mean, maybe I should just ask you, is it bad for society for hungry people to steal food if it's necessary for living?
No, I think you could totally justify that. The marginal cost associated with a business having a meal versus a person taking it if they're hungry, I think you could justify that type of thievery.
On a utilitarian framework, right?
Kind of, yeah, sure.
Okay. Would you? So, I mean, when
it doesn't make sense to me to have, like, I can't imagine a healthy society created where there are people that have an inordinate amount of food and then other people that are starving to death. That seems to me like a very obvious wealth transfer needs to occur there. There has to be a trade from the people that have all the food or housing or clothes or whatever to the people that don't. There has to be some level of transfer there.
Yeah, but you compare. So, I mean, oof, getting Hegelian here, and I don't like it because I don't think this is true, but I'm going to try it. What one would argue is that like all conflicts are based on resource scarcity. Like this is where ultimately these conflicts are derived from, right? So you just take that example with a hungry child stealing some food from a Walmart, and you just apply that on a bigger scale. And like, I'm sorry, like which society would be better ultimately? The one where like these people like take back like, or not take back, but take command of like their own resources or somebody else's resources for the betterment of everybody. Like,
well, no, because like in a society where people can just like take command of other people's resources, it probably discourages the expansion of those resources in the first place, right? Like even Marx understood this. Even Marx said that in order for a socialist society to be created, we need capitals to come in and create all the capital first. So socialism won't flourish until the capital has already flourished under a capitalist. Then that capital will be subsumed by the proletariat, and then we'll move on to like our post-scarcity bullshit or whatever, right? So like, yeah, you need to have some incentive structure in place for people to even begin to expand their capital or their business. If you have a society where everybody's stealing and killing and all that shit all together, like I said initially, I don't believe that society fosters very much happiness or creativity.
But
I don't
this
think
has
anything
been a society that works on, yeah, but this society doesn't work on all levels. This is why these revolutions happen in the first place. There's a social ill like that derives from these sorts of societal structures, and it ends up being one with lots of poverty. Like this is why like communism is like more or socialism is more popular amongst the third world or more impoverished nations.
Wait, so what is your point, or what are you saying?
My point is that this system doesn't work. This isn't my point. This is a leftist point. What is
the? Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out. What part of this doesn't work, or what was the counter?
Okay, so what your argument was that capital comes in and it exists to improve the livelihoods of everybody. So even though
in a roundabout way, but go ahead.
Well, that's the issue. It's in a roundabout way, and that level of benefit is disproportionately going to one group of people or one class of people. Again, I hate this.
Which I don't think that's necessarily a problem if it disproportionately goes to one class. But go ahead.
Well, why isn't it? Because that's going to like inspire like revolutions. It's going to inspire instability.
I don't believe so. I don't think revolutions are inspired from a disproportionate doling out of wealth or whatever. I think it's when some people are getting some baseline that's not being met. I have no problem with billionaires existing or capitalists making a fuck ton of money until there are people on the streets starving or homeless. Well, now we've got a huge problem. Like I think that as long as those fundamental things are met, then it's fine. If some people want to make more money, that's whatever. I don't care.
Does it really have to get that far? Like, can't you just be poor?
No, I mean it depends on the level of access a poor person has to, whatever shit.
Okay, so where they fall on like Maslow's laws of hierarchies then?
Yeah, like for instance, let's say that you're poor. But like you can afford to go to school. You can you have like internet. You've got like a house or whatever. Like it's okay to be poor then in that case. Like that's fine. Like I don't think that all poor people are the same, right? Poor people in America generally do way better than poor people in like probably like Eastern Europe or parts of Africa or South America.
This is the third worldist position. I'm sorry. But this is the third worldist position with the idea that like communism or socialism only flourishes in like the third world because the first world's already overdeveloped, so that it can't. and again, reiterating, I don't agree with this.
Sure.
I'm just like trying to like, okay, I'm doing my best to like steelman arguments I don't really believe in, and
Okay.
I'm pretty much floundering as I'm doing it.
No, that's
So
fine.
I don't know. I hope. Yeah, I mean that's the extent of which I wrote down. I don't know if do you want my out? You said you don't want my outline. You want me just to ban or ambush you with it. But that's pretty much what I got. Yeah, I don't know if you have any questions you want to ask or anything like that.
Not 100%. I think we're pretty clearly in it. Do you think I'm completely fucking crazy or?
No, I like I said in the opening, I pretty much agree with what you said. I don't think other people. This is going to sound both arrogant and like I'm jerking myself off, and I'm not trying to. I don't think
Oh
other
yeah.
people really possess the language to like push the boundaries of what you're saying, because I think like what you're saying has like a lot of broader and bigger implications than they're capable of like understanding. And that sounds like really arrogant when I say it that way, because I don't think I'm capable of that either. But I think there's like a deficit in the conversation.
Yeah, I 100%
between
agree.
you and other people when they say this.
Yeah, I had a conversation yesterday with a guy called Pisco or whatever. Do you know that guy? Apparently he goes on.
No.
Oh, he's like a law student guy or whatever. He goes on some shows or whatever. That was a really, really, really good conversation in terms of teasing out like exactly what my positions were.
Oh, how's this one right?
And what?
How's this one right?
No, I'm sorry. I wasn't being sarcastic. It was a really, really, really good conversation. I agree that there are broader implications. I think there are broader implications on both sides, though. And I'm irritated because it feels like sometimes people might look at broader implications of mine, but they don't look at implications of their own. So, for instance, somebody might say that, like, okay, Steven, you're saying that people can defend their property. Well, do you think that somebody should be able to murder their neighbor if their neighbor steals gum from them? And I'll say, like, well, I guess depending on how far we're going to down, sure. And they're like, okay, well, I've owned you now. Look at the implication of your argument. But then if I counter and I say, okay, well, the implication of your argument, let's say a guy tells a neighborhood, I'm going to go and burn down 27 houses. You can't do anything to defend yourselves because if you do, I'm going to kill you. So you have to kill me. Do you think that everybody has to back away and like let their houses be burned because life isn't worth property? Like, I think that oftentimes
No, I
people,
don't.
Yeah, I know that you don't.
I mean, I think life is worth property.
Sure, I'm just saying that like generally people don't. I don't think people like to look at the broader implications of anything. They're always like focused on like one specific thing.
Well,
I'm
with
sorry.
you, though.
Yeah, sure. I don't necessarily. I'm sorry. People just told me that you were asking how this conversation went compared to the other one. Oh, I think our conversation has been fine. Sorry, I just realized that was what you were asking. I fucked up. Okay.
Oh, that was like 4 minutes ago.
Yeah, I know, but people are
no,
just saying it now. I just understood. Sorry.
I think most people probably do agree with what you're saying. They just disagree about. So I remember that distinction earlier about proportionality, and this is probably a failing on their part because I don't think they realize like every law against everything is done at the end of a gun, right? Every act of government it's an application of violence. It's collectivized violence to some end, and I think you kind of just have to own that, like, even if you think stealing's never okay, no matter how small it is, the end consequence for all theft is death.
Because you're calling police that will invariably,
basically that. So I mean, I think they agree with you. I just don't think they
realize it.
Understand
Well,
proportionality.
yeah, because then I start asking like, because one thing I'm curious about is like, okay, so I can't kill somebody that's aggressing my property. Am I allowed to call the cops? Because ultimately, anything a cop does is going to be backed up with a threat of murder, right? Or a killing, I should say, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah.
Okay. That was more or less all I had. I'm sorry. I feel like I ambushed you. I'm sorry. I feel like I ambushed you with like rambles that were like hard to follow because I'm not nearly as articulate as you. And that was, yeah.
You're never ambushing me. Don't worry. I appreciate the conversation.
Okay. Thanks for talking. Oh, and thanks for buying me hot wings that one time.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks a lot. Have fun. I'll see you later, bud.
Yeah. Peace out, dude.
Bye. Not everybody is born with a fucking silver spoon that can start 50 million fucking businesses. You don't think a lot of these small businesses are literally these people's livelihoods? What do you